20th of March 2025. It's now 7 o'clock and I'd like to start this meeting. I would like to remind everybody present that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded for publication on the Council's website. There are no planned fire alarms this evening, so in case of any emergency, please exit by your nearest door and congregate at the assembly point outside the college. I have received apologies tonight from Councillor Arnold. Councillor Johnson is subbing for him. Are there any other further apologies? Done. I move the minutes held on the 19th of Feb 2025 as outlined on the agenda are approved and are a correct record. Are there any comments on accuracy of the minutes? Minutes are approved. Are there any declarations of interest? Right. Straight on to item 4 then, which can be found on pages 11 and 12 of the agenda. Can I ask Lucy Smith to present, please?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so very briefly, this is just a briefing note for the committee's information on a rejected call-in request for the Planning Development Management and Performance Report. This is coming before the committee because of the updated overview and scrutiny procedure rules for information. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy. Do members note the briefing note? Noted. Lovely. Item 5, Planning Development Performance Management Report, to be found on pages 13 to 94 of the agenda. Can I ask Dr. Smith to present the report, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. This item has been brought to you to explain the process, methodology and conclusions that we reached in response to part of the motion that was passed by Council. So the motion is set out on in paragraph 1.2, but just to summarise it, the motion is essentially deals with two things. Firstly, the motion deals with a range of performance issues around the planning service from 2015. The motion then goes on to address a requirement to look at the local plan. So specifically, the motion asked that a report was developed on the management and achievements of the planning service since 2015, produce a year-by-year performance analysis. The report should produce a subjective judgment on the performance of each of those years. And in addition, the motion asked that a full and detailed investigation into how and why the council has not been able to formulate a local plan, and requested that the Chief Executive Officer prepare an assessment of the findings and implications and possible further points of action. The report in front of you deals with those parts of the motion other than the local plan. The local plan part of the motion was dealt with in another report which went to Cabinet the same day and was considered by you as a committee at your meeting on the 19th of February. So the report before you looks specifically at the performance of the planning service. It does contain a year-by-year analysis. The approach that we took was to look at each of the years since 2015 and examine in some detail, and it's summarised in 4.4, the various issues that would affect the examination of whether there was any systemic failure or systemic areas of worry about the way that the planning service was working and the decisions that were being made. So it looked at the number of applications received, it looked at how the applications had been decided, it looked at committee items, it looked at those that had been where the officer recommendations had been overturned and where they hadn't, and so on. And it went through all that detail. in order to examine whether there was anything untoward that would lead us to want to go into further examination of the performance of the planning service during those years. The upshot, as set out in the report, is that there was nothing remarkable in the decisions made in the planning service or the committee during those years when benchmarked against all our comparator authorities. So what we did was we compared the evidence that came out of that analysis and compared that work with other local authorities. If there had been any significant difference between the two, it would have caused us to go deeper dive into that area to examine, well, why is there a big difference between Thurrock's process or Thurrock's decisions and those made in other comparable local authorities? But in fact, as I said in the report, we found nothing remarkable or different that would lead us to conclude that there was anything systemically different from anywhere else. And we were able to understand the variations in patterns within Thurrock as they related to the circumstances of Thurrock at that time. So, for example, not surprisingly, we found the number of applications and decisions that were required during the pandemic were very different from other periods. Well, you'd expect to see that. The circumstances were very different and so on. So in those terms, we were satisfied that there was no cause for us to go any deeper. What I did draw attention to was, in common with most other planning services, the way that the performance of the planning service is reported in terms of the criteria that the government was then using, it meant that you could disguise, or it was disguised by the process, about delays in the determination, because as long as you started the process, in that sense, the clock stopped ticking. Now, every council has this issue, and in fact, the government, the current government, is changing those rules to using a different criteria so that you can properly see how long it takes to determine an application, irrespective of when it started. But at the time that we're under consideration, the rules were complied with, but it masked an underlying problem about delays in determination, which under the current planning management regime, those issues have been identified, and those delays are being addressed, and the delayed determination issues are being case by case are being reduced, and they're trying to manage those non-determination cases on a risk basis. So those where the council is most at risk, they're seeking to determine as quickly as possible. But it does open up, as I say in my commentary, it does open the council to a risk of appeal for non-determination. And in fact, we've had one case not that long ago because of that, and we may well have others, although the planning service is now trying to, as I say, deal with that legacy, is communicating with applicants to try and reassure those applicants that the matters are now being addressed with a view to bringing them to determination as soon as possible. I've also made reference to the fact that we had a year or so ago, we had a planning advisory service review of the planning service, and it wrote a report which was published, was considered by Cabinet, and against which we developed an action plan to improve the planning service performance. That action plan has progress on that action plan has been reported periodically to the Cabinet, and we invited the Planning Advisory Service to come back to us to independently review the progress. That review is now complete and will be reported to Cabinet in due course. it is, according to the Planning and Advisory Services discussions with me when they did come back, it is highly unusual for a council to invite the planning service back to review progress. But we felt, in our circumstances, that in order to give that independent assurance to members, that the past delays in the resolution of the performance of the planning service, we should ask them to come back, and thankfully they agreed and have now, as I say, completed their report. So, in conclusion, Chair, the methodology we used to examine the performance was detailed, it was analytical, and from which we were able to draw the conclusions that are set out in the report. And therefore, on that basis, I was satisfied that those aspects of the motion had been satisfied by the review undertaken. Because I mentioned the local plan aspects of the motion, I'll just make reference to that in the report that you considered in February, we did in fact deal with that part of the motion. So we dealt with it in a separate report because we undertook a very detailed, you may recall it was a very big document that was developed as an appraisal of the local plan history by a company called Santec. And they did that independently for us and brought forward, I think it was in the order of 50 recommendations for the service to undertake in order to provide for a robust outcome of our local planning process, which of course, the heart of which was also reported to Cabinet, as was the revised timetable for the local plan in order for us to fulfil those recommendations and ensure our local plan could be robust. But of course, as part of that analysis, we examined the reasons why the local plan was not going to fulfil those requirements without this additional work. And that's, whilst a painful process and one that's regrettable in terms of the decision-making that in the history of the planning service, at least it was putting us in the right frame, as well as addressing that aspect of the motion of the council. Now, you've already considered that report. You were satisfied that it fulfilled the terms of the motion, but I just, for completeness, just mentioned that to show that we looked at the whole of the motion and completed it, but it was in two separate reports. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take questions, obviously.
Thank you, Dr. Dive. Members, have you any questions for? Councillor Kelly?
Yeah, just very briefly, obviously we know the government are going through some big changes on planning at the moment. We're hearing obviously that they are quite keen to get houses built. We know there's quite a lot of green belt in Thurrock, and we're hearing from the Deputy Prime Minister that actually some of that green belt may be handed over to grey belt. In addition to that, we're also hearing that government is looking at actually reducing the power of local planning committees. I did hear something like anything under 100 homes would actually be handed over to officers. I think that's the correct terminology was to allow more experienced planning officers to make those decisions, and local planning committees would only be involved with schemes over 100 homes. So sort of trying to get ahead of the game, what's your understanding of that? Are you prepared? Because I have heard that these changes could come in within the next 12 months. And in your observation, why would a government make those changes? My observation would be, well, they're making those changes, I assume, because they're frustrated with planning committees potentially rejecting too many applications. So what would your comments be on what you think the future of planning looks like? Because that's going to massively affect the local plan going forward, or however you formulate where we build homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question. From my perspective, I think the first and most important point is that those proposals in a bill have yet to progress in Parliament. And any of us that have been long enough around in terms of planning legislation know how much through the process of through the parliamentary process, how much intentions change compared with the original intent and the legislation that comes out of it. So I think it would be, I think it's important for us not to be too quick to judgment about what will actually be enacted, because there will be a great deal of interest in Parliament and indeed in the Lords about the proposals the government are currently making. And I think there's no doubt that the actual legislation will be influenced by those processes. I think from the second issue from my perspective is we will be prepared for whatever outcome is enacted, and we're aware, obviously, as you've outlined, of some of the proposals in very broad terms. But even when the legislation is enacted, most of the issues that will affect local authorities will actually be taken care of in the guidance, not in the broad legislation that's undertaken. And again, as you'll understand, the guidance takes a good while longer following the enactment. So we may or may not have an act in place in 12 months' time, but we won't have the guidance in place. So there'll be a period of negotiation around the guidance that will subsequently lead to how we have to operate it. So I think until we get to that stage, there's a lot of speculation, but from our point of view, we're not jumping to act on anything until we see the substance of it through the Act, and more particularly for us through the subsequent guidance.
Councillor Chuckworth.
Thanks, Chair. I was just looking at the performances on benchmarking, and it shows that, between 2018 to 2021, the council actually did very well in their performances, over 100%. But coming to 2023 to 24, there was a dip in their performances, which was lower to compare with some other authorities. And can you touch on that, why there was a dip? Thank you.
Yes, there was a dip in, interestingly, in a lot of places. In the period, the post-pandemic period, planning services lost ground, both in terms of staffing levels, because of, as they did in most of the public services, with people not returning to work, taking other choices. So it was affecting the resource levels throughout. And in fact, as we all know, the number of planning professionals relative to the demands on their time is falling everywhere. And the availability of planners to fulfill the roles in planning authorities is becoming an increasing problem. And that was the start of the problem for Thurrock, as it was for many places, in that sort of coming out of that post-pandemic world. And it was simply the imbalance of resource against the demands that were on the service in terms of applications coming through. We've got to a better, more regular place in the following that by the recruitment of more interims. But of course, whilst interims are a good source of immediate respite, of course, interims are also footloose and can move between authorities and so on. So it's difficult to get any continuity and stability. So the important point in terms of the work that we did post the first Planning Advisory Service review was to look with the service to restructure it, to try and reflect where the demands for Thurrock are, which of course we have a relatively high number of large applications because of the big industries here, alongside the typical number of smaller applications. but the way we'd structured our teams did not necessarily reflect the balance of the demands on them. So the changes that were introduced reflected that, and introducing those changes and working with the planning professionals who inputted to those proposals, we were able to go through a period of consultation successfully, establish a structure and begin the process of recruiting, as far as we're able, permanently to the posts. The second issue we did was that throughout that period, we ring-fenced and protected the resources of the planning service. So despite the fact that the council continues to have to make substantial reductions in its budgets, did do for this year and will do again next year, we protected the budgets of the planning service, recognising that we were seeking to have a better response to the demands that are on the service. So in restructuring it was not an attempt to reduce the resources, it was an attempt to redistribute them and increase the attractiveness of the roles to attract permanent members of staff, whilst recognising, of course, that we continue to need some agency and interim staff to support us.
Just one thing from me on planning performance. When we're all on committee, we see the planning team are under the cost, but for me, the thing that lets us down, we are really very weak on enforcement. Are we recruiting on that? Do you agree that it's weak, or that's what I see? It takes, simple things seem to take forever. Like the last one we've had, which I thought was simple, it took a year and a half, so it seems to drag on. I mean, I'm always nagging Nadia, and I must be the biggest pain that she's got, but it's, yeah. So my questions tend to always be about not enforcement going through.
Councillor Byrne, I entirely agree that it's been a problem for the council, and I've been aware of it because I was members particularly, but also some members of the public were bringing to my attention constantly when I first came, where they felt the planning agreements were being abused and were wanting enforcement of standards. And obviously I'm not suggesting that those views were always correct, but there was enough of them, it gave me concern. But the issue wasn't a lack of effort of the staff, it was a lack of resource. And part of what I was saying to the previous question was that we hadn't got the resources in the right places. So part of the changes that Claire and colleagues looked at in terms of rebalancing the resources in the service was to look at a better approach to enforcement with more resource going into that area to ensure that we can respond better than we have in the past. It won't be perfect. We've still got limited resources, of course, as a council. But by protecting the budgets, we've been able, we hope, to use our available resources more proportionally to the sorts of issues that are of concern to the council.
Right, Councillor Spate, we agreed at the last meeting you'd have 5 minutes. You want to speak now? Councillor Sisterson.
Yeah, thank you. I think the main concern, looking through it, I'd have of past decisions, and I don't think it's the case now, were the number of decisions officers recommended refusal on Green Belt, and then they were overturned and were approved at committee. And that seems to me an unusual situation, because residents will often be opposed to those. So I think that was my main take-up from that.
Thank you for your observation, Councillor Assistant. From my perspective, first of all, the number of occasions when that's happening is not out of kilter with most other places that we benchmarked against. So there was nothing untoward about it. And whilst I understand your point, it's a sign of a relatively healthy system that the committee sometimes agrees and sometimes disagrees with the recommendation of officers, both ways, both disagrees on a no and disagrees on a yes sometimes. And that's proper politics, that's proper democracy, from a quasi-judicial body that has to operate it. Where I would reference improvement is that one of the challenges I felt about the performance of our planning service is that I didn't feel that officers in the planning service were two things. Firstly, the officers weren't providing enough support and briefings and preparation for members in advance of them considering individual cases. And that's both for the committee as a whole, but also particularly for the chair, in order that the conduct of the meetings were efficient and effective and a proper discussion, and that members always have the opportunity to properly understand their legal responsibilities in the context of particular cases. And I felt that needed to be strengthened. And secondly, I think from my perspective, I don't think when I first came, there was enough emphasis being given on the requirement for members to undertake proper training and development, given this is a very, very significant legal responsibility. But as you rightly say, those things have been addressed now, and I'm sure it's not perfect, but I know it's a lot better, and I'm sure it's something that the Planning Advisory Service will comment on in their second review of our progress.
Councillor Spate, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. That was interesting. History is always differs in the telling from where your perspective of looking at it is. And I'm sure, for example, Councillor Kelly may have just had some thoughts about comments that went his way. Anyway, and also I make the point that, as I will go on to say, that as just made by Cathy, there were two significant spikes in 2 years that cabinet members, the only comment they actually made was that we had these two significant spikes, which weren't addressed in the report, but there you go. Committee members are well aware of my deep-seated concern about historic planning matters in the borough, and my continuing fear is that we're just papering over a substantive number of cracks. Last year, in a bid to improve scrutiny, honesty and transparency, the Council engaged the services of highly respected Ian Parry, the head of consultancy at the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny. Mr Parry has engaged with councillors through a number of training sessions. His advice has been consistent. He urged all members, particularly those engaged with scrutiny, to question the work of the executive and indeed to constructively challenge the work of the executive. He rightly said scrutiny is absolutely critical and crucial for the running of a high-quality council, and it was important the executive were held to account for decision-making. He didn't put a timescale on that scrutiny, and I was therefore motivated by his comments to suggest a look back over historic planning decisions, because I'm convinced beyond personal doubt that servants of this authority have engaged in activity that has brought or even passed the threshold of criminality. I can think of a number of planning applications made by this authority that beg a belief. I'm clearly advised legally that to name applicants in the public domain from within this chamber puts the council at legal risk. So I sought expert and independent opinion. My concern was so great that I twice successfully submitted a motion to council asking for a deep dive analytical probe into planning history over the past 9 years, which was then to be accompanied by a subjective commentary. The first was passed in September 2023. Around the same time, a separate review, as Dr Smith has referred to, a separate review on Thurrock planning was launched by the LGA Planning Advisory Service. So it was agreed to wait the outcome of that peer review before we decided what we'd do. The review, and it was interesting in the presentation that Dr Smith skipped around the fact of actually saying that it was pretty damning of Thurrock. That review didn't address the concerns of a lot of people within this chamber. And so I asked for the independent inquiry to go ahead as mandated by members. Dr Smith balked at this because the power of full council is limited, he had the executive right to ignore those demands. His reasoning was that an independent inquiry would be very expensive and Thurrock Council could not afford it. and trying to act constructively, I met with Dr. Smith and discussed what we could do. His suggestion was that he would take personal responsibility for an investigation, and I use the word investigation. His words that it would be relatively simple to get the statistic together, and once that he had them, he would, when time allowed, delve into what happened in some of the more contentious ones. I briefed him on a number of those contentious ones that I've witnessed over the years, and he agreed to look at them and produce a detailed subjective report. Injudiciously, as it turns out, I took him at his word and expected a review that would take several months, and it would examine some of the concerns, take evidence from people who are engaged in those projects and listen to anecdotal evidence around them, and where required, seek factual evidence through commissioning the Council's investigative team. I proffered, as I said, the names of some landowners, some agents, some developers who I felt should be subject to scrutiny, and I took the amended motion to Council, and it was passed on the 28th of November. In particular, the new motion included the phrase, when that report is completed, request it be reviewed and analysed by the CEO of Thurrock Council, who will then prepare an assessment of its findings, implications and possible further points of action to be submitted to Cabinet. I have no qualms that in his response to the second motion presented to Cabinet astonishingly quickly on the 12th of February, Dr. Smith and subordinates produced a log of the number of applications and outcomes. But much of it was a simple cut and paste job. It failed to subjectively analyse decisions. It glossed over major issues, such as a substantial increase over 2 particular years in planning decisions that were given against evidence-based objection from officers. The numbers were massively out of kilter with the Council's average record and significantly different from the national average. As I just said, members of Cabinet commented on that. But Cabinet did not particularly challenge. They accepted the report without question, which is why I have continued to press this matter. Among those concerns were reports of an offer by a developer to offer a particular council some £30,000 to support an application. That councillor reported honestly to the council and the police, and a firm trail was established through a forensic investigation, and an alleged offender was interviewed under caution. Unfortunately, it was word against word. The CPS determined that there was not enough compulsive evidence to go to court to get an even chance of a guilty verdict. Understandably, police didn't proceed. Give it 2 minutes. Councillor Smith, Mr. Smith went on for a while. If you want to stop me, stop me. It's up to you.
Go ask committee. Do you want to give him more time?
Oh, about another minute and a half. Okay. Understandably, the police made a decision not to proceed. But I doubt that there is a member of this council, knowing the record and dignity and integrity of the councillor who was involved, who does not believe that bribe was offered. And offered in relation to an application brokered by one of the biggest developers associated with many major projects in the borough. Many approved against officer recommendation. None of that was included in Dr. Smith's report, nor other doubtful and nefarious applications that have been historically approved. And if you don't know what nefarious means, it reflects criminal or malicious activity. So I go back to the words of Ian Parry. He cautioned against cosy scrutiny, which is what we got from this report and from Cabinet. I remind members who were present at a briefing by Mr. Parry when he challenged us to be robust. His actual words were, if you're not happy with the answers you receive and challenge them. If you are still not happy, challenge them again. That is in stark contrast to what I personally perceive Dr. Smith's perception of scrutiny to be. This week he wrote to members and was critical of them for continuing to challenge decisions, suggesting it was improper and even offensive not to accept the words of officers. What I find offensive is that in building plots across the borough, the skeletons of bad or even corrupt planning are buried. Dr. Smith was empowered to dig them up, check their integrity and prove that our new council is open, transparent and honest. Last paragraph. Recent experience of a lack of enforcement and a lack of knowledge from the borough shows that we have got a long way to go. This week, a senior director of this council admitted he didn't know the difference between East Tilbury and Tilbury. I recognise directives from government make protecting Thurrock difficult, but it is not impossible. This committee has the chance to ask the question about how we got to where we are today and what the journey going forward is going to be like.
Thank you, Neil. Response from anybody? Tom?
Yeah, sorry, respectfully, Neil, apologies. Right at the beginning, you mentioned something. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Something about Councillor Kelly. What was that? Sorry, I didn't know if it was what you said, sorry.
Yes, Tom. There was talk about Dr. Smith mentioned the fact that that historically the planning committee had not acted as well as it should have done. And that was under the years. And he actually talked about the chairmanship. I think he actually used the word chairmanship. And clearly, that was on your watch. You know, I'm sure you would stand muster the fact that you felt that
Right,
you
Neil.
did a good job.
Okay. Dr. Dive. Smith, sorry.
Just for the benefit of the committee, given that this is a public record, I absolutely reject in total Councillor Spate's assertions about what he says we agreed. I never, ever would agree to investigate individual cases on the basis of allegations where no evidence is put forward. Nor would I take such a drastic step to interfere in the actions of the planning service as a quasi-judicial process without substantial reason to do so. So I didn't and would never have agreed to go into cases, nor, and this is more to the point in terms of the official position of this council, nor does the motion of the council make any reference in any shape or form to the examination of individual cases. There are no grounds for pursuing individual cases unless and until evidence is put forward by a member of the public, an elected member or an official that provides evidence of potential or actual wrongdoing. In the circumstances where there are, they are dealt with in a proper manner. If they involve alleged criminal activity, it is a matter for the police, and that's where it is addressed. If it's a matter of conduct of the council itself, then it's a matter for the council to address. We have procedures to deal with these things. We have a process through the whistleblowing process where we invite anyone to formally advise the council where it believes there is wrongdoing of any sort by the council. And I invite any member of the council to use that system, and I give a reassurance to this committee and the rest of the council that in those circumstances we will examine any case, any situation, but we require that to be substantive evidence that is sufficient to warrant an investigation of those matters. As I said to the committee at the beginning of this, the approach we took was to meet the motion of the council as agreed by the council, and I believe that we fulfilled that requirement, and more importantly than me, the cabinet agreed it. So in those circumstances, I feel we fulfilled our responsibilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Recommendations for the reasons...
Hang on. Sorry, Councillor Byrne, can I come back on the point there?
Sorry,
Thank you.
come back, Councillor Kelly.
Yeah, nice one. Right, so yeah, thanks for the comments. Thank you, Neil, for what you've said there, and thank you, Mr. Spiff, for your responses. Ultimately, yes, I was chairman of the planning committee for 8 years, actually. I believe it was 8 years, from 2015 all the way through to 2024. It was actually quite good reading this report, because it actually told me how many schemes that we'd gone through in my time as chair. And I did put a few numbers down on how we performed. And in that 8 years, we did discuss 325 planning applications. And it would appear in that time on 32 occasions we went against, respectfully, officers' recommendations. That represents around about 10% of the time that we went against what our officers recommended. So it also suggests that we followed officer recommendations for 90% of the time as well. Looking at the 32 times, it wasn't just a case that we were ramming applications through on the green belt. We were also voting against schemes as well. And actually, I believe on one occasion we got fined for going against a particular developer. So in that sense, planning is subjective, and that's where this gets difficult. And it's not just going against officer recommendations where we got into trouble. It was actually going in favour of officer recommendations where we come under some huge scrutiny. I'll give you an example, the PAS review. The PAS review criticised us as councillors, not for going against officers, but actually agreeing with the Civic Offices project. Look at Stamford Rail Station as an example. And when I went through the numbers on who was voting for who, I did see a comment made last month at Cabinet from, I believe it was Maurice Cook, who suggested that she was surprised at the amount of Greenbelt applications that went through via the Conservatives. However, I've researched that and I could only find 2 applications where, as a committee, one particular party pushed a scheme through without opposition support, and that was East Tilbury, which was 200 homes next to the train station. I think one thing that encouraged us towards that was 100% affordable homes. That development never actually went ahead because the developer went bankrupt, but I can only assume it was because of schemes such as 100%. And then Ship Lane, the PDI centre, it wasn't too far. That was actually scenarios where Conservative members pushed it through. So I appreciate and respect the Cabinet member's opinion, but I don't think that was fair because that was twice in 8 years. Out of 325 applications, that's a percentage of roughly 0.6%. We also, as a council, myself, I know I had a reputation for being very pro-developer, but I did try and block certain big schemes, Thurrock Marshes, Woodview, and ultimately, in my experience, it is difficult planning. I remember we approved a scheme in Balvin. It was the Glass House Retreat. Heavily against officer recommendations, and we gave that one the green light. It's actually, if you look on TripAdvisor, it's actually a very well-established building. So how would you subjectively make a decision on whether we made the right decision there? Well, it was against officer recommendations, but TripAdvisor seems to think it was okay. So planning is incredibly difficult. I don't doubt, Neil is a genuine individual, he's a very good reporter, and look, ultimately, he should be taken incredibly seriously, but from my perspective, it is very, very difficult. And in relation to particular developers having success, again on page 93, there was a comment that one particular developer had success. It doesn't say who that developer was. I can only assume, if you look through the report, that is the only company that come up 4 times was Iceni Projects. And when I looked through those 4 Iceni successes, that was Langdon Hills Golf Course, Kemp's Farm, Dowsgate Farm.
I'm very sorry to interrupt you. Can I just remind the Scrutiny Committee that scrutiny responsibilities are to scrutinise the executive, which includes planning policy. You must be careful not to be drawn into a debate about planning decisions which are not within the purview of a scrutiny committee. So just be careful about discussing individual cases.
Thank you.
Okay, well, look, in the sense of not getting dragged into too much trouble, then yeah, ultimately I won't comment too further. All I would say is that, well, you know, 3 of the 4 times they had success was supported by cross-party members. So again, and that is planning. But look, it's a minefield. It's subjective. I'm not suggesting that the councillor Spate's wrong, but it is very hard to dissect. Look, I won't go no further because clearly we're entering into grounds where we might end ourselves in trouble. I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to poll your mentioning names, but oh, sorry. No, sorry. Just following on from Tom or Councillor Kelly, I was with you for 5 years, and I think, yeah, we're always going to be, we're the ones that get hit on social media. It's not the planners or the people that have accepted it, it's us. I mean, me and Tom, we've been subject to the same developer 6 years of hounding us on social media, haven't we, for a decision we made 6 years ago, and we're still getting it. And now Councillor Fletcher's getting it from the same. So we are in that firing line. And the ones that everybody's remember is, well, one of them that you mentioned, I won't mention, but there's one that sticks out, and that's always going to stick out. And there wasn't enough scrutiny on that one, there wasn't any scrutiny on it, and that's always going to be around. So I don't think you can over-scrutinise things like that because as Dr. Dave and you've all found out, our residents have got very, very long memories. They can go back 10 years and say that didn't happen then, and you've got that legacy, haven't you, of everybody wanting you to do what didn't happen 6 years ago. So yeah, it's tough, and we've all got different ideas, and we argue on planning, we argue on all committees, don't we? So it is what it is, as they say. So are we all happy with it, this one, to conclude? On that one now, Lucy, thanks. Yeah, recommendations. The recommendations of the report, are we going to take that as okay, or do you want me to read them out, the recommendations?
As printed.
Just going to note them as printed? Great. As printed, yes. You happy with that? Everybody? Thank you. Saves me reading another page. Item 6. Members' right of reference. Can I ask Lucy to present this report, please?
Sorry, yes, so the member's right of reference, this is under the new scrutiny procedure rules, and we've had a request for a member's right of reference from Councillor Spate. Under the member's right of reference, any member of the council may request that an ONS committee consider a matter that is relevant to its functions, stating the reasons for the request and the proposed outcome. Any member who submits a request will have the right to attend the meeting in which the item is to be discussed, to explain the reasons for the request and to have the item discussed. So Councillor Spate has submitted a member's right of reference, and that's why we're here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Councillor Spate, you've got a strict 4 minutes on this one, and I'll have to stop you, okay? Thank you.
Well, I don't need to say anything much more, except we've just... No, I'm going to say one thing, because you've got the opportunity now. Mr. Smith just made, or Dr. Smith just made a statement talking about evidence-based complaints and making people aware. Now, as people know in this room, I am a journalist, and indeed, Dr. Smith's own word, an intuitive one and a very good investigative journalist. And I wrote an article on in my website several months ago, which included the headline, "Corruption Hidden in Plain Sight," and it made reference to certain things.
Neil,
2 days later, I got a letter. No, it's relevant. It's relevant.
Right of reference.
It was a... Sorry?
Is this related to members' right?
Oh, it's relating to the fact that Dr. Smith has just said that he would take, and he wants evidence-based information. I gave him specific evidence-based information. What I just said...
Sorry, Neil.
About, no, sorry. No, it's really important that the truth's out, Gary.
Before.
And I got a letter from the biggest libel lawyers in the country, Mishcon Dorea. And they accused me of defamation of one of our property developers. And I sent them the evidence, and they dropped their claim for defamation because it was true. I gave that same information to Dr. Smith, and he ignored it.
Right. Any questions for Neil?
He's gone.
Oh, no. Humour. We need a bit of it, don't we, today? I know. Item 7, Housing Works Procurement Delivery Model, as to be found on pages 95 to 108 of the agenda. Can I ask Councillor Hooper to kick this one off, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee. I'm just going to introduce this item. I'm not sure I can just follow the last debate as interestingly, but I will do my best. In January 25, the process was started to re-procure the repairs contract, the housing repairs contract. In June 25, this was stopped due to concerns around a single provider approach, and there are some elements of the tender process that we had some concerns about. So the contracts were extended to the current providers by 18 months to 2 years respectively, with a review, giving us an opportunity to review the tender process and allow time to re-tender. I am pleased to see that the tender documents are a little more focused on local contractors, as I was keen to keep the Thurrock pound in Thurrock, but also understand that balancing act between best value for money, which is always a debate for all councils. I was keen to see that the repairs contract works closely with the 4 integrated teams within Thurrock. I was also pleased to see more of a focus on training young people and developing apprentices. And I was also keen to have an emphasis on better value, or added value, from the winning contractors. The contract is for 5 years plus 5 years, with a potential break or an opportunity to give a 12 months notice on the contract. Most councillors receive concerns raised by housing repairs. And a lot of these have been fed back to officers and been taken into account as we go through this particular tendering process. This is one of the largest contracts that the council actually have. So I was very keen that the place Scrutiny had an opportunity to look at this before I take this to Cabinet. I'm sure that you've all read the papers, and I'm really happy to take questions regarding the political element of this, and I have Shahid behind me who can actually deal with any technical questions that you'd like to ask about the tender process.
Councillor Hurrell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report, Councillor Hooper. 3 things. Start with number 1, of course. Golden thread alignment on page 100. Can you explain what that is, please? .6 on page 100.
Chair, would you like me to address the question? Yeah. The Golden Thread is part of the new government's Building Safety Regulations Act, post-Grenfell, whereby all safety information around our high-rise blocks is collated, and this does away with all of the desegregation that was found as part of the Grenfell inquiry. So part of this process and approach for us will be to ensure that all our building safety information is aligned with a key thread of responsibility identified. Okay.
Thank you for that. I had an idea if it was that, but obviously it's nice to get it out in the open so we all know for definite. Thank you. The page 99, HRA 30-year business plan. When did this start? And silly question, when does it end? 30 years later or?
Sorry, Councillor, can you just ask the question again?
Sure. Page 99, 4.13, the very end of the paragraph, the last 4 words, HRA 30-year business plan. When did it start and when does it end, please?
Chair, would you like me to? I have colleagues here from Finance. Well, the HRA 30-year business plan is an ongoing process and reports are submitted to Committee and Cabinet around the financing, the income generation from our HRA accounts. So these are published documents that come to full committee and to council.
So around my laptop. So a report was presented to Cabinet in February on the HRA rent setting and budget for 25-26. And that referenced the 30-year HRA business plan. And the actual HRA 30-year business plan is 2025-26 because we reset it every year to 2029-30. It's a 5-year extract out of the whole entire 30-year business plan. The 30-year business plan was set 2 years ago, And then we refresh it every year on a financial basis. So we will set the HRA to balance every year as part of the budget setting process. And you will see it as part of every year's budget setting.
Okay, thank you. I've learnt that tonight then, because I didn't know that at all. It just sounds a bit misleading when it's 30-year business plan and every 5 years and every year it's refreshed and that. So, but either way, yeah. Thank you. Now for the confusing one out of the three. Page 95, 1.1. The last sentence in the paragraph, these contracts are due for re-procurement within the next 18 to 24 months. Then you go to page 101, 102, and the graph there, contract expiry dates. Unless I've got something wrong here, obviously, which I might have. One finished the 1st of March 23, February 25, March 25. So some of these actually finished. One finished 2 years ago. Am I missing something, or can you explain it, please?
Chair, happy to take that. Bear in mind, Councillor Howard, when this report was drafted, obviously it's been some months in the drafting, those contracts that have formally expired have been extended subsequent to this report being submitted to committee. So they've been extended as a stopgap provision to ensure there's some continuity of service until we can start and conclude this new procurement round.
Does it say in the report they've been extended? Because if it doesn't, then the report's misleading. If it does, then fair enough.
I believe there is reference in the report about some of these contracts would be extended in this interim period, so that when we do conclude the new procurement round, those contracts will come to their natural end and all subject to normal termination clauses.
Okay, it's in the report. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks for the answers.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Harrell, it's in here. It does say that some have been extended. Next. Councillor Johnson's next. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. How do I put this? I was portfolio holder myself for housing up until, well, April 24. And this proposal to go forward with a single contractor seemed to be going ahead very well. But I understand that if a new regime comes in and they want to change it, and that's fine. I didn't know that it had been paused. That's my fault for maybe not paying enough attention. However, there's something in this report which has happened to me several times with reports over the last few months. There's a line in it that is completely different to what we were told as a cabinet. And it says, Council committing to a single supplier the terms of the contract, the value of the proposed contract and the limited number of final bids submitted. Well, at the last cabinet committee I remember, it was actually, we were crowing about how many bids we had put in. Can someone explain to me when that changed or how that changed, please?
So, Chair, I think I'm happy to answer the question. I'm not sure I understand. Where are you referring to in the report, please, Councillor Johnson, so I can be clear?
Executive Summary 1.2.
Oh, in there.
The very last line, it said that one of the reasons it's been stopped, I'm not saying it shouldn't have been stopped, that's down to the current administration, that's up to them. But one of the reasons it says is because of the limited number of bids. But we were told there were many bids come in.
I'm not sure. Obviously, I don't know the context in which you were advised of that. There was a great deal of interest in the original bids, and a number of companies initially expressed an interest, and some went part down the process. But ultimately, from memory, I think there were only two bids went all the way to completion. So a lot pulled out during the process. So I don't know if that explains. Obviously, I don't understand the context in which you were told, but that was the reality at the time.
Yeah, yes, what you're saying makes perfect sense, but I don't know when it happened, because as I said, it was quite. I think it was actually the April Cabinet, where we were still talking about this and very happy with the number of bids. So between April and June, it looks like in here, it all stopped. I just don't understand how it happened. And as I said, don't want to be political in here, but I've found this very, very many papers have come forward where there's things now in reports that just contradict completely what, as the old administration we were told. But okay, as I said, I just have to accept it. Let's sit there and go. But when we go to financial implications, it's probably one of the only financial implications I've seen where it doesn't start with there are no financial implications, where there's no pound signs at all. I mean, there must have been a cost to this original procurement process. I mean, is that included? Is that stayed within the budget envelope we've got to keep it all going, or how much did it cost us? And is this one costing us more? Just financial implications to me should tell me what's being spent and what isn't.
So they were my financial implications. I don't like to put figures in there because it can influence prospective companies out there that would see your budget envelope. We do have a budget envelope for the tender, but if I put it in there, then prospective companies who are bidding for these contracts will bid at that maximum level, and they will then submit their bids at that top bid. We don't want to influence the tender at this stage. So, if you're putting a budget in that report and it's out in the public domain, which it will be for Cabinet, when this report goes to Cabinet, that figure will be then out in the public domain. So I'm very careful with big tenders like this that the budget figure isn't shown in there. Obviously, we do have a maximum budget for this tender, but I wouldn't like it to be in the public domain.
Councillor Johnson.
I wasn't asking you to tell me any information about the budget. I just want, it must have cost us money. It must have cost us to run a procurement process. And I just think that should be included in there.
I can include that in the future. Obviously, it's an internal service and I manage the team, but if you would like me to include that in financial implications, I can from now on, I agree.
Just that might give me a better idea as to why it was really turned down, because I have to be honest, with my last recollection of a Cabinet meeting and what it says here, they don't tally.
Chair, just
Okay, carry on.
if I may, just on the previous procurement round, as Councillor Johnson has highlighted, there were initial quite a wide range of interest from the market, quite a lot of expressions of interest from potential suppliers. But the procurement process, this tender process was run in accordance to the public contracts regulations. So the process, it goes through almost like a process of elimination. So there was a wide range of expressions of interest. Then that leads to a first stage of tenders. As you can imagine, it whittles down. But final bids, final submitted tenders were very limited. I think it came down to 3, but then one contractor pulled out midway through, so we were left with 2 final bids. Thank you.
That sounds a reasonable amount to me. It's not one. You've got something to actually go against. And as I said, I don't think that's the reason why we didn't do it. I think there's an underlying reason. I don't know what, but I don't think that line is the reason why.
Thank you. Councillor Lydiard's next.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I was on the working party as well, and we were advised by external consultants to go for the one supplier, and in the end, I thought that they both were not interested, and it did cost a lot of money, and the contract coming up will be for sort of at least 50 million over 5 years. Therefore, I think it's really, really important we get it right. I welcome the new procurement procedures, but there's an awful lot in the detail. And I know that's not the right place to deal with that here. I'll just go through them quickly, synchronising all the systems between ourselves and the contractors, making sure our tenants know the contractors coming by a simple phone call would be great. Having photos of the work completed would be fantastic. The job checking and inspections, because as councillors, we only see the mistakes. Okay, and I've said this before, and I know things are probably a lot better than we think, but I really do feel that inspections need to be stepped up. Tenant reps, my experience of them are that they tend to be yes people. You know, oh, well, we get a cup of tea and a roll or whatever. I think we need to be a little bit more careful who we use, and signing off by the tenants, and that would be really useful as far as I'm concerned. But I do welcome the new proposals, and look forward to being on the next working party if there is one.
Thank you, Councillor Lydia. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to mention, as part of this procurement process, we are welcoming members of the committee to be involved in that. So, you know, the evaluation process in particular. So, really want members involved in that. So, we welcome your input.
Councillor Sisterson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, have we moved away? Obviously, there was a single contract before and the new procurement, and I like the emphasis on using local subcontractors and things like that. And how does that fit in with like the neighbourhood-based model that we're kind of working towards? I think is what I'd like to ask.
Chair, if I may, obviously we haven't yet worked out the final details of how the delivery model will look. Whether the new appointed supplier operates satellite sites or one central hub, that will come down to some commercial considerations, I think. But we will try as best as possible to replicate the new operating model, to have sort of local access points possibly for residents. But those are all things that we'll be teasing out as part of the tender specification process.
Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Chair. I really wanted this as part of the tender process, and I'm really interested to see how the provider is looking to deliver that.
Carry on.
And just to note for members that this procurement will be done under the new Government's Procurement Act regulations. And that has a lot of additional responsibilities on the local authority. So everything has to go through formal processes. Everything has to be published through the new central government portal. So all along, there are a lot of stages that we now need to follow on all new procurements since February the 24th. And there are a lot of notices that we have to publish along the way with this procurement as well. An additional thing that the government has done is they will have a debarment list. So any suppliers that the government are notified should not be on a tender list with any public sector body, will be on a separate debarment list. We can go into this live debarment list and we will automatically be notified that those should not be contracted with. So it's everything will be under the new regulations as well.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I do like the idea, Councillor Huber. I think, thanks very much for the report with that, to get local companies in as much as we can. I think there's a great need. There's some good companies in Thurrock, let's be honest. And sometimes, I know in the past, when things have been put forward, there's a company just down the road sitting there that could do much the same job, in fact probably better, at a better price. Procurement is always a very odd thing, should we say. So, but on Councillor Lydia, I basically brought up a point. We really do need to check the works sometimes. I remember once when I was a councillor before, and about 15 houses have been refurbed, only for me to go back there as a councillor and be pulled back by the residents to say, look at this, look at this, look at this. And so they had to be refurbed again. And my thoughts were, how did they get away with that before? Because they must have been paid for it. So, you know, that is a very good point, that we've got to keep an eye on these companies. We want value for money, but we want good service as well. Thank you.
On that one. Councillor Green. Wake up.
Thank you, Chair. So under the performance management report that was presented to the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee, relating it to this, it says % of tenants who report they are satisfied with the overall service from their landlord is worse, even though the RAG rating is green. What are we learning from those people going into this tendering process to make sure we get it right?
Councillor Hooper.
Thank you for raising that, Councillor Green, and it's something we're very, very aware of. Officers are actually looking at how we can improve our improvement ratings, and there are regular meetings with those officers. It's all part of an improvement plan on the housing, or strategy on the housing improvement, not just in terms of customer satisfaction, but how we're involving our customers in developing good approaches within our housing. This work is ongoing. I'm hoping to see an improvement in this area, certainly in the next year.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Councillor Chinook.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wondered, you know, when the repairs are done, what rate do they get inspected at? You know, say there's 10 repairs done, how many times do they get inspected?
Thank you, Chair. The current contract requirement is 10% of post-inspections of all inclusion and exclusion works under the contract.
Thank you. Only previously, when I was a councillor over in Ockenden, I see some horrendous repairs, you know, and perhaps we could get the rate done a bit better, and 10% perhaps.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just to come back on a little bit more about Councillor Green and overlaps with Councillor Sinnock's question, is that I think we take the point that we need better communication with our customers. And I know that the officers have really taken this on board, particularly around kind of damp and mould issues, is keeping our customers better informed. And that's something that I know officers are really working with alongside our contractors and the people who use our services. So thank you.
I welcome that.
Thank you. Oh, no, it's me. Anyone else? Sorry. My favourite 2 words that I always use is due diligence. And there are 2 words that I very rarely hear at TVC. It's not in this report anywhere. I don't see the word due diligence mentioned ever. And in private sector, that's an everyday thing. That is number 1 priority. You make sure it can happen before you pay out. So. Can I ask, what checks are carried out before we actually pay out for large sums of money? What checks are carried out for the work we are invoiced for? And do we ever check high costs that the actual work is carried out? Do we actually pay? Have we ever paid for something that has not been done? Or do we often pay for something, or we never pay for something that's never been done? Do we actually, like, if we're going to spend like 27,000 on a refurb, do we just pay the invoice? Or do we not check it? I mean, we just said it's 10%, so we've got 90% of the refurbs are not checked. Is that right?
Let me take your last point, Chair. So I would say never would any high value works that have been done, would we pay the contractor where the work has not been done. Every element of work that the contractor has undertaken has to be evidenced to my team. we have weekly, monthly governance and contract monitoring meetings. So the contract is basically, to simplify it, an inclusion and exclusion process. The contractor gets a fixed fee for all the inclusion, so everything that's included within a basket, no matter how many times they have to repeat that repair or go back to the property for that inclusion, they get one fee per year. Then there's the exclusion baskets. Now these things are the major elements of a property: roofs, windows, heating elements and such like. All of that has to be evidence to us as to why that repair is required. So it has to come with a clear proposal, with basket rate costs, and then with photographs and such like. And then they have to evidence that the work has been completed, again, with sign-off sheets, with inspections, and with photographs that is uploaded onto the system that is interfaced with our own asset management system. So, in essence, if you have evidence that work has been paid for but never undertaken, I would like to see that. Yeah.
Councillor Hooper? Oh, sorry.
Can I add to that as well? On top of that, we have very strict expenditure control processes currently because we're in intervention. So anything over 25k would obviously go to Dr. Dave Smith and the Chief Finance Officer to approve. And then anything below that, I have to approve as well. So there is, even though they're processing and checking the invoices, you then have myself checking them, and then they go to Dave and Dawn to check as well. So it's very tightly controlled.
So do we actually go and visit? Like, if you get a block of flats that are all 15 identical kitchens, you could have the same photos, couldn't you? And we would never know. You could pay 14 times for one kitchen. So do we actually go and, if there's like 15 kitchens being built, do we actually go and look and say, yes?
No, but I would expect the corporate director, when she's signing off, to have checked the evidence to make sure that her officers have checked the invoices before they come to me and then before they go to Dr. Dave Smith.
Are we on recommendations now? Yeah, can we take those as read, because I don't read another full page again. Thank you very much. It's noted. Right, we're on item 8 now, which is on pages 109 to pages 170. And I think this is one we're all very passionate about. So can I ask Councillor Hooper to present this report, please? Report.
Thank you, Chair. And again, I'm just going to introduce this. Homelessness is one of the biggest challenges this council faces, and councillors across the country. There will be a big overspend on homelessness this year, and I'm expecting that number to probably rise again next year. Local authorities have a duty to have a homeless rough sleeping strategy. The last one was written in 2020, and the world is a much different place than it was 5 years ago. One of the main objectives is to try and prevent homelessness. Two of the main reasons why people are homeless in Thurrock are siblings being asked to leave the family home. So we are looking at doing some education in schools about young people and how to avoid becoming homeless. The second is private landlords with no-fault evictions. Also, private rents are rising considerably, which is making it difficult for people in some circumstances to pay their rents. It's unimaginable what it'd be like to be homeless. People often are placed in temporary accommodation. Children often being asked to live or move away from their local school areas, which increases a rise in mental health, people's general health issues, and people are moved away from the communities they know where many loved ones lived. At the end of the day, there just isn't enough homes. We are currently looking at modular build homes, which I hope that we can bring more information to you in coming weeks. I believe Councillor Green may be even trying some of them. We are working with government to look at how we can develop council housing, and we're working with developers to look at how, and housing associations to look at how we can bring affordable homes to buy and rent. But still unclear really at this particular time what's affordable, because I think that's something we still need to negotiate. I'm sure you've all read the report, and I'm with Ryan today, who can actually take on any technical questions. I don't know if you've got anything else to add, Ryan, and I'll take any kind of political points.
Anything from Ryan?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Just to draw attention really just to the key strategic themes within the document. We're focusing around 3 primary areas. The first, probably the most importantly, as Councillor Hooper's identified, is around supply and affordability. We can have plenty of initiatives, we can put in plenty of work, but if the homes aren't there, then we've got a stumbling block initially. The next theme we look at around homelessness prevention and intervention, the locality model and the operating model have been referred to already, so making sure that we are adopting an approach which is right for the different areas of the borough and the residents, not trying to have one homelessness service that fits everyone. And the last theme really is critical, because whilst this is a strategy produced within the housing service, talking about homelessness, homelessness is not simply a housing issue. It's only something that can be tackled in true partnership with true collaboration across multiple different organisations, across multiple sectors. So we really want to drive that within this. It's also not just working with organisations, but also with our households that are unfortunately at risk of or facing homelessness. So I will stop there, and as Councillor Hooper said, happy to answer some further technical questions about the strategy.
Councillor Green.
Okay, first of all, thank you, Councillor Hooper, for your report. I'm looking forward to my night in the modular home. Looking back at the performance data that we got from corporate, it says that we actually are down with a number of households approaching the council at risk of homelessness, which is obviously good. But we are in a, as you said, in a loop with a lack of housing, with the need of modular housing. How quick can we get this going, and how are we going to amend this?
That's a really difficult question. I think, first of all, I'd like to give people the opportunity to look at the modular housing before we start building anything, to give people the opportunity to comment on it. Is it fit for purpose? The modular housing we're looking at, my understanding, or can be corrected, it's got a lifespan of 30 to 60 years. We're hoping to set something up in a car park near here, so people can actually go and look at this modular housing. Then it really does, it is an issue for planning, because these will need to go to planning to be approved. But once we get kind of the green light that people are happy with these type of modular homes, we will certainly be putting some suggestions to planning about where we can actually put them.
Claire?
So what we're looking to do over the next month or so, develop a plan with our approach to modular housing. If we are going to bring it back to place, ONS, with a view to developing a number of sites over the coming year. So we're hoping for the next year to have at least 3 to 4 sites up and running for modular housing. Oh, just to say as well, with regards to the strategy, while the strategy is quite high level, what we will be having is an annual plan, action plan. So that approach with modular and house building and fulfilling our homelessness obligations will be in that annual plan. So it'll be an annual plan that we can be held to task and held to account over.
Thank you for the answer. I just want to go on to reason for leaving and why people are being made homeless. One of the higher ones is asked to be let leave by the family, going up since 2020, 2021 to 2023 to 2024. Not a lot, but quite a few people. What age group are we looking at when we say left by the family? We're saying 18, 24. What range are we looking at on that? And if it's quite a young person, are we working with children's services to try and prevent this?
Thank you, Councillor. So I was curious about this myself, and I did a bit of research when we were drafting this. It really surprised me because the average age was coming out within sort of the 30s rather than being younger people. Now, you will have people at either end of the spectrum. I've disappeared. But it was an older age group than I probably was expecting when I looked at that as well. We do have younger people approaching the service. We do have responsibilities and obligations towards those younger people, and absolutely there's partnerships and much closer working between our colleagues in the homelessness team and our children's services. So there are those kind of links being built, but being asked to leave by family is something which isn't just sort of our younger residents. There is certainly older population that are in that position for one reason or another.
Councillor Sisterson? Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. The other thing as well is that there's health and well-being comes as part of this as well. So some people who are presenting themselves as homeless also come with other wider challenges, and health and well-being being one of them. So this is why, as Ryan said, it's such a cross-cutting agenda. It's not something that, it's not even a council document in that sense. We've got to engage with external partners like Shelter and various other partners to make sure that we genuinely deliver on what will be an implementation plan for Thurrock.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There's a couple of things. One, in the community and workforce impact, I wonder if we could have a section on care leavers, because they're meant to be a protected characteristic, and if we can see how homelessness affects care leavers in particular.
Councillor Hooper.
I think it's very much part of our strategy. Care leavers are a priority. And so I think, right, well, I'll make that sure that's changed before it goes to Cabinet. So thank you for raising that, Councillor.
Councillor Shinnock.
Yeah, under the modular housing, the scheme that's probably going to come forward, how long would they last, the buildings?
To meet the requirements of the funding for MCHLG, they have to have a lifespan, is it 30 years? Yeah, 30, 60 years. So that they're not sort of temporary accommodation as such. So they do, and they have to meet the requirements, yeah, of the build, yeah.
Right, me. Well, these modular homes, myself and Councillor Jones has said we will spend the night in one of them to take one for the team to make sure.
Offer accepted, thank you.
Oh, sorry, Councillor
Noted.
Jones. No, yeah, I would like to spend it with Councillor Green, but Councillor Jones has stepped in on that one. The comment on homelessness for the 30s, I mean, I would see that as the effects of COVID, because all those nice young people with great jobs had mortgages and were paying it, and then once that struck, I know so many 30-year-olds that lost everything, and they're the ones that seem to be the biggest strugglers now, that age group, and it's affected mental health. They're getting addicted to all sorts of things, and it is, yeah, we are now seeing the knock-on effects of what happened for COVID when they lost everything.
Yeah, so if I can come in, it was a very, very difficult time. Some of the things when people are asked to leave by family and friends can come down to household dynamics, and after a period of time which was so stressful, relationships become untenable, and there's also that impact. So I think that the whole pandemic has a lot to answer for with what we're seeing now. If it's okay, I just wanted to come to one point regarding care leavers. Whilst obviously the equality impact assessment can reflect that, within the strategy itself there are some specific actions around supporting care leavers as targeted programs. So whilst the equality impact assessment doesn't address that, the strategy absolutely does.
Councillor Lydia.
Thanks, Chair. My experience of sort of homelessness and evictions can certainly sort of come down to the landlords, and maybe, you know, being in touch with them a little bit sooner, we could get things sorted out. But also substance abuse, people coming into this country and sort of not really having somewhere to stay. And in Tilbury, it's a real problem. I've got, you know, 7 people in one room and 5 people in one room. And that is more or less, well, it's as good as being homeless, isn't it?
Councillor Hooper?
I don't think it... I think we're talking about the quality of housing. I do think that's something I'd like to bring to this committee maybe at a later date, because I think we're going to start looking at some licensing with the council taking a proactive approach and to looking at private landlords and HMOs. I'm hoping to bring that fairly soon, because I agree that there are lots of places where people are living in actually really poor conditions. And I think we need to take that proactive approach. And there's a lot of evidence that supports this proactive approach, reduces a lot of antisocial behaviour, and people's health is a lot better. So I will be bringing that forward to the Place Committee fairly soon.
Anyone else? Councillor Hurrell?
Say it twice. Thanks for the report, Councillor Hooper. Page 128. Let everyone get there if they want to get there first. These households are identified as being at greatest risk of being unable to meet their own housing needs and therefore likely to be in the greatest need of homelessness, advice and assistance. Socio-economic outcomes. Economically inactive people, people on low income with debt or in poverty, people unable to work due to ill health, unemployed people. It says they're at greatest risk. So linking that in with, shame, Councillor Spate's gone on now, but anyway, linking that in with planning, and what percentage of social housing for new build planning, what is the percentage of social housing for new build planning applications? Because there's a percentage of social housing, isn't there?
I don't think there's any social housing applications. In terms of working with developers, they should deliver, I think our council policy is 35% of their build is for affordable homes.
That is what I was trying to get at. Sorry, I didn't explain that very well. That's exactly it. So, but we never get 35%, do we? It never happens, does it, on new developments?
Councillor Watson?
So in planning, currently there is a policy at 35% affordable homes. And affordable homes are anything up to 8% of market rent. And it's up to the developers to do that. Also, affordable homes are shared ownership products. Under the new legislation, if it's on grey belt, it's 50% of affordable homes. The council can't dictate it has to be social housing. Councils can build social housing, therefore that's why under the HRA borrowing we are building 36 social housing, and hopefully we'll do that more. But what we can do is have a really grown-up conversation with developers and sort of like say what we want as a blind tenure for those 50% or 35% and how we can get them to there. So there is a big piece of the work starting to go together to do that, but the only ones who can really set social housing is housing associations or HRA.
Chair?
Can I finish?
Oh, sorry.
Do we ever hit 35? Does that ever actually happen though? Or is it just a target that when they decide to go from 200 to 180, does the affordable housing seems to be the one that drops rather than the full price?
So on the big developments, absolutely yes. There has been cases where you've got 10 and they have to give something over, then that becomes unviable. But we still carry on pushing, saying that we still want that. Sometimes those planning applications go through, sometimes they don't. More of the cases have been previously, historically, is on the Section 106 more than anything else, because what they do is they say it's unviable, that they can't pay that contribution because the land value has gone up or the cost has gone up. And so we have to hunt for that a little bit more. And one of that was on Averley on the football pitch. So, but in generally, I would say majority of it, we do get the 35%, yeah. And the ones that are wavering, they are the small builders, and then we still chase them down, or we might get 30%, but we do stick to 35 religiously.
I'm surprised, Secretary, because I really didn't think we actually hit 35 often. I thought normally it was pushed down. But what I'm really trying to get at a bigger picture is we need to build more social housing. There needs to be more affordable housing, obviously, because otherwise homelessness will just keep going up and keep rocketing. So that's my point. Thanks.
Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Councillor Hurrell. I think the modular housing will help with that, but we're also lobbying government around actually allowing councils to build more homes and seeking funding to do that. And I'm hoping that we'll have more news about that in the coming year.
Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, do you know the square footage, is it in here, of the modulars? The average square footage? I'm just how we're going to get these two in the to stay the night there. Yeah, will they be bumping into each other?
Well,
just curious.
It depends,
Councillor Hooper.
Thank you for your question.
I got the box
Councillor
room.
Day. I think it depends on the type of property, because we're looking at 1-bedroom flats, 2-bedroom flats. We're looking at 3-bedroom homes. So I think it does depend on the size, and maybe I can be better off giving you that information when we've actually got them built and we've got more information which I can bring you to place scrutiny when we're in a position to do that.
Just to say, we're looking to have a live demo on site within the next possible 4 weeks.
Okay, thank you. And obviously they have a tenancy agreement, the people that go in, tenancy agreements, normal tenancy agreements. Right to buy? Well, it will continue?
We haven't worked through the details of that yet, but we're initially going to be using them for temporary accommodation, homelessness.
You should be able to get in there, you two, by the sound of it. So.
Cheers, Matt. Right, Ruff. Just want to touch on rough sleeping. I always thought it was a London thing, but now I'm seeing rough sleepers in Corringham, Stamford. We're also seeing many effects of mental health on our streets. It's widespread across Thurrock, so I welcome this report and anything that tackles and addresses these issues. I'm all for that. But last year I attended a funeral with Neil for what we called our much-loved homeless guy, James. We went to his funeral, we scattered his ashes, blah, 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 blah. This guy didn't want accommodation. He was happy with his lot, happy with what we give him. There's a new guy, who's the same. He's happy to sleep under the bridge. We fill him up with food, we give him drink, we even go to the chemist, getting cough mixture, cold and flu remedies, but here's another one that doesn't want help. So what do we do? Do we give them help? Do we not give them help? Should we feed them? Should we give them water? Should we give them their cold and flu remedies? I mean, his shopping bag is always full up. I stop nearly every day and ask if he wants something from the chemist, or we don't give him alcohol, although some people do. But there's many of these rough sleepers that actually don't want to accommodate and they're happy. So what should we do with these people? How do we tackle it? Or do we just leave them happy?
Yeah, so firstly, I'd never advocate we just leave them. I think this is where the implementation strategy is going to come in, because we need to work with other partners like Shelter and other agencies that will be, well equipped to work with the council to deal with these challenges. Because, as I say, it's not just a council problem, but fundamentally we do get homelessness funding from government, albeit it's very small grant funding, to try and address some of those kind of really cases in those states. And when we had the winter homelessness funding, there were some people who didn't want help, but I think part of that was because there were, you know, some of them were just not, some of them were, one or two weren't from the UK, for example, so they felt uncomfortable receiving help. But fundamentally, there will just be one or two, but we need to work with other agencies to address that. We won't just leave people and not offer support.
So should we carry on feeding them and make them happy? That's what we're going to do anyway, but there's no issues or problems with that, I guess.
I think there always has been in Thurrock round about the kind of like 7 to 10 people who sleep on the street through choice, often through choice. What I do think we should be proud about as a council is our CHIP team, who actually help some of the homeless people into accommodation, often, as you've suggested, with drink, alcohol, drugs, mental health issues, to maintain a tenancy. And there was recently an article in The Guardian about the great work that Thurrock is doing. I think it's something we really should be celebrating and trying to roll out more. It also showed that these people tend to take up a lot of costs in terms of health, social care, police, time. And because of this kind of support, that actually reduces the cost to those services. And so the CHIP team more than pays for itself in terms of providing better lives for people to live and maintain a tenancy. So I just wanted to share that because there are some success stories in Thurrock where we managed to get people off the streets.
Right, can we... Councillor.
Page 168, please. 168. Review the winter night shelter to assess its impact in order to guide future provision. Second one down is, if SWEP, Severe Weather Emergency Protocol, provision proves to be successful, this presents an opportunity to expand the offer to become the year-round community-led rough sleeper provision in Thurrock. Can someone explain what Severe Weather Emergency Protocol is, the details of it, and how will Severe Weather Emergency Protocol work during summer, please?
Thank you, Councillor. So, just making sure I'm good to go. So, the Severe Weather Emergency Protocol comes into effect in periods of extreme weather. If there is expected to be below freezing temperatures for a number of nights, if the temperature is very, very hot for a number of nights, then we will put in place some emergency provisions so that people can find shelter, be off the street for that period of time. There is some work that's been going on with some community sector organisations, voluntary sector organisations, to put in place a year-round provision that doesn't only exist in the times of those severe weather events. It isn't something which Thurrock has typically had before, and unfortunately, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, our efforts to establish a winter night shelter were hampered quite significantly. We'd launched one in 2019. When we got to 2020, quite understandably, people were a little bit busy. But there's some really good work going on with that provision to make sure it links in with physical health, mental health, substance advice, so that those people who are sleeping rough are able to go to a place and receive the support that they need. But also through the ambitions of the council being enabling, not delivering it directly ourselves, because there are some very well-placed organisations who are far better placed than we are to provide that right level of support. I just wanted to also just say one thing, if it's okay, on your point, Chair, earlier on. I just wanted to make a plea that if anyone does have concerns about someone who may be sleeping rough or concerned about sleeping rough, by all means, please submit a StreetLink referral. You go online to their website, you go use your phone, submit a referral to the team, it will get picked up, and the team will do what they can to support them. If we do encounter individuals with capacity who are not necessarily wanting to be supported, the support doesn't go away, it'll still be there. We'll deliver our duties if they do decide they want that support in the future. But thank you.
Carry on.
Yeah, that's really pleasing to hear. We have actually got something. It's just the severe wording of it, severe weather emergency protocol. Obviously, it'll be year-long, you're saying, hopefully. And if it helps one person, it's great. So it's just hope the more it helps, the better, of course. We don't want people out there to help, but they're out there, so the more it helps, the better.
Thanks, Chair. Wouldn't it be nice if we could use CO1 as a homeless shelter?
Why not? Well, that could be a serious question. Would that be feasible? Or was it just, I know it's for sale, wasn't it?
It's been suggested a number of times and we are looking into it.
I'm happy to test it out with Councillor Green.
Councillor Green ain't happy with that.
Right, the recommendations, are we going to agree again and take as read?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. Right, item 9, the Q3 forecast revenue and capital outturn report, place directors of Directorate of Services. Can I ask Seema, is it? Am I getting the right name, Seema? To present this report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So what you have in your pack is the actual Place Directorate report as requested. And at Q3, the Place Directorate has a position of overspend of £764,000, which is a reduction of 1.155 million on the Q2 position. And that reduction has been due to a deep dive on all forecasts, which has resulted in 512k reduction in staffing forecast to reflect the pay award. And that was previously forecast at 4%, but has now been adjusted for the actual pay award at 2.5%, as well as savings associated with restructures across the Directorate. Other adjustments have been worked on during a major deep dive of all forecasts, and that has increased income forecast to reflect actual income being received and also reduced expenditure, so transport, waste disposal contract spend and various other reductions. Temporary accommodation still remains the most significant pressure on the homelessness service budget, and this shows a forecast overspend of 2.192 million, as we discussed earlier. And this is due to increasing numbers in nightly lets. And to offset this pressure, we will transfer 965k from the Public Health Contained Outbreak Management Fund in reserves to bring the overspend down to 1.227 million. The General Fund Capital Programme is shown in the pack, and that shows slippage of 6.031 million at Q3, and 1.5 million of the slippage relates to the A13 widening project, where several claims, if successful, will be paid in 25-26. An amount of 700k of capital grant funding will also be carried forward to next financial year for the A126 improvements. We also have 922k of government grant funding to support the delivery of weekly food waste collections, of which £771,000 will be utilised next year to roll out food waste caddies. And I'll take any questions.
Councillor Green.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. Could you just advise what the active travel fund in the general fund is actually used for and where it's being used?
Can we come back to you with a detailed breakdown of where it's been spent?
Go on then. Okay, I'll go on to the next
Thank
one.
you.
With your indulgence, Chair. Thank you. The infamous A13 widening. I know there's, you said that there's been some extra money because of claims. How long can this go on with claims and claims? Will that be it once it's done?
Yeah, so they're actually a very set amount now for the claims that are going to be settled in 25-26. So there's a specific amount. So we're now nearing the end of the claims, and it is the compensation claims that are left to pay out. So most of them have been processed, but what's left in the balance is the ones that will be settled now, that are going through and will be settled in 25-26.
Carry on.
Thank you, Chair. You've got the people referral unit. What is? Can you just go into a bit further what that is all about, please?
People referral unit in...
On page 185, about halfway down, people referral unit reallocation. Yeah, but yeah. Halfway down under potholes and challenge fund, D0020 is next to it. Yes. Yeah. Why would we be doing that if most of our schools are academies? Yes.
I'll check on that because I think that's been allocated to place wrongly because I think that should be in a different directorate. Capital programme, yeah.
Could you come back on with that? Thank you.
Right, just briefly from me. What I see in this report is pages of numbers, but what I am pleased to see, there's items included in there what we have been requesting for many years. I see major cuts with our residents really not noticing any cuts to services. It's far from perfect, but it is encouraging that the only thing we keep coming back on temporary housing and social housing, it's far, far from adequate, isn't it? And I think we all agree on that. Are we happy to nod off the recommendations on that one?
Yeah, agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. The next one, our favourite item, Section 106 allocations, projects and committed spend update. You can find on page 191 to 218. Can I ask Tony to report on this, please? Who's Tony? I've got Tony on here. All right. Who's Tony? Where's Tony? Councillor Watson.
I forgot how many names I had then for a minute. Sound like my mother. So, thank you. So, in front of you is the update on the Section 106 allocation, as we've been promising that we would actually bring it back. As you can see on page 192 and 193, it gives you a bit of a breakdown of what is feasible and now in progress. And if you look at the A3, this is one we done earlier. That will give you a list of what is happening and where it's being allocated at the moment. The feasibility that cannot be currently delivered are working through still. The non-feasibility but cannot be delivered is with legal at the moment, because we're going to need to go and relook and go and have conversations with developers. And still investigation is also with legal in order that they can go and have conversations with developers to try and change. What we've been really honing in on is those Section 106 that have been here a long time and at the end of their life. And to try and retain them within the borough. The really good workshop, I thought it was a really good workshop, happened on Tuesday night, and I know that Stamford and Homesteads were really happy because they have got what they wanted on their Section 106 in there for their gym. And so, and also there were some really great ideas coming forward about how we can spend in other areas with those chairs the money that they require for their area. Like, for instance, in Horndon, they're looking at the primary schools and what to do around there. So if you've got any questions, really happy to ask.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. And I must say, the other night was a very good night, very productive night. And forums, all those that I spoke to enjoyed it very much. And it's a good way of going forward. We've got to encourage forums to be involved. They know what the area needs. And so I think we're going down the right route that way. I know for a fact our one's always been involved with the 106 money for a very long time. We've got a subcommittee, so we know where we are and what's needed. I think that's the thing at the moment. We've got to check on when some of them 106 agreements are ending and make sure that we can continue them, and hopefully the developers will. But I think we're going down. It's good to see that we're on our way now to find out where this money can be spent. Thank you.
Councillor Sisterson.
Yeah, thank you. I'd back that up. I think there's really good progress. It's less than a year, isn't it? It's since May, June last year. So just in those few months, I think it's tremendous progress. So thank you for that.
Can I just add in my thanks to the forums for obviously their patience, but also for the amount of time and effort and engagement that they've had, and the support they're providing the team with regards to this piece of work. We know this money, the issue of the money that's been hanging around for quite some time, the 106, but hopefully we've allayed some fears, and hopefully there's a bit more confidence that we've built with the forums now and with members around their ability to actually deal with 106 more efficiently, more effectively. I just want to pass on my thanks to the chairs of the forums for the time and effort they're spending with us and with the teams to support us and help us bringing this through.
Right, can I be complimentary for a change and thank everybody? We've got so many. We've got officers, we've got cabinet, we've got members, everybody's been deep into 106 money, and it's I would like to have seen at this meeting say we've actually given somebody some money, but we know there's very good reasons for that. The only question I've got to ask is 15 million in the pot, and why don't we invest that and put it into an interest accruing account? We're not going to spend 15 million overnight, are we? There's going to be at least 12, 13 million. We could, even if we put it into a short term, we could. It's only going to benefit and we've got just 15 million sitting there, not accruing any interest apart from the DP World money. It just seems criminal that we're not making money on it.
So we have taken your point on board, and we are working with the legal team and with our finance team around getting a policy, because we haven't actually got a policy at the moment with regards to interest accrual and when we place the 106 money, but we are taking that forward. So hopefully we'll be able to report back in the next quarter on where we are with that policy.
Right, and can I ask if that interest is shared with the committee, please?
No comment.
Sisterson.
Just on the same point, from reading the report, it looks as if it has been earning interest, presumably, but it's just not been decided what to do with the interest. Is that the case? I know she's gone, isn't she? Yeah.
They'll keep going away.
It's not been put into a separate 106 account, so it can't be easily identified as separate amounts of interest. So it's going into one general pot. So the idea potentially would be moving forward is to separate that money out and to have a separate policy around interest accrued on 106.
But it has actually been earning interest, but we just can't identify what is 106 and what is other. Yeah, okay, thank you.
P2, pass that recommendation. Great stuff. Right, item 11, the work programme is on pages 219 to 222 of the agenda. Lucy, can you take us through the work programme, please?
Thanks, Chair. As it's the last meeting, if you're happy, I'll take the work programme, the action log and the recommendations tracker all as one. But really just to say that, yep, this is the last meeting, so there won't be anything to add for 24-25. As you can see from the action log, everything's been completed. I think we've got 2 outstanding, one action on the ferry, and then there's one regarding dust and air quality, which is still progressing. There's also, as well, the recommendations tracker, which outlines all the recommendations that have come to place overview and scrutiny. And at the very bottom, you can see the Cabinet forward plan for the remainder of the year, and if they've been to place, are scheduled for place, or are not on the work programme, just for transparency. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Jones.
We've got the ferry on there as well, Lucy, aren't we? You know, we've got to keep, that's in orange at the moment, or so, okay.
So I've got an update on the ferry. So the Thames Estuary Growth Board are leading the partnership piece of work around the ferry. So just to let you know that the transport modelling piece has now been completed, and the action group are now working on looking at an operating model and how this is going to take this forward. So hopefully we'll be able to report back to ONS in the next quarter on progress around where we are and where we're hoping to move towards with regarding an operator.
Thank you. It'd be nice to see that in green, Claire. Thank you.
Anyone else? Right, me again. Oh, sorry, Councillor Who?
Sorry, I thought I'd raise this, and I raised this at People's ONS as well, around air quality and dust and air quality. One of the things, I know you can't do it this municipal year, but I'd like it to be considered for the next municipal year in terms of a task finish group looking at air quality across the borough. And I think it would be a cross-committee working group. And I'm only recommending that or requesting that. It's up to you, obviously, as committees to decide what working groups you go for. But it's just something I'd like to be considered.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Well, next year, none of us know if we're going to be on the committee, do we? So we have to. Someone, I'm sure, will take that up. Councillor Shinnock.
Yeah, I'd just like to say to Councillor Hooper, I welcome that, because it's something I've been asking questions on Trafford Under quite a few years and don't get a lot of response. So if you can get a working group forward, going forward, I welcome it.
Right, like me again. The work programme, all of it, you've only got to look at the amount of green boxes that are on the action log to see how much work's been done over this year. I think it's nearly all green, isn't it? So I think everybody's got to take praise for that. I want to thank, as it's end of term, I want to thank all the members for their attendance and your eagerness to take part, even Councillor Green. Also, thanks for the role that the committee have taken on in the Cabinet. And for me, a special shout out for Lucy, who's held my hand for a year and got me out of jail so many times. So with that, unless there's anything else, it's... Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Councillor
just briefly,
Kelly.
Chair, just to echo that, obviously I know Cabinet members spend a lot of time here, officers, members, and of course yourself for chairing. It's not an easy committee, this one. Obviously it was new this year. It's a new format, and once a month, the amount of, obviously, items you have to get through. So yeah, again, testament to yourself and everyone. So yeah, well done, Chair, and yeah, looking forward to next year.
Just one to add to that. I mean, we come to these meetings, we talk, but the work actually happens when you leave the chamber, doesn't it? It doesn't happen in here, and there's so much work that goes on once we leave. So again, there's time. You don't have to do this. We don't have to do it, but we spend hours and hours. So thank you, everybody. With that,
Sorry, Chair, just one other thing as well. I will echo, yeah, I do find also that things are getting done now a lot better. Obviously, if you look at these charts at the end, we have these action plans. They are dealt with, and I do think that's a massive improvement. Thank you.
don't overpraise them or they'll want to stay. Anyone else want to add? Sorry, I've closed. No, we done?